Hello, this is Dr. DeRosier again, and I am here for my last lecture to talk to you about publishing your work. If you'll remember correctly, publishing is the last step of the writing process. At this point, you've done your pre-writing, you've done your draft, you've revised, you've edited, and now it is time to publish. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, I mean it's time to celebrate. You are almost finished. Now, what if you wrote, though, the most beautiful thing in the world, but you never published it anywhere? What if it was the most groundbreaking, wonderful ideas full of excitement and promise for clients, but you never told anyone about it? There would be no celebration, let me tell you. So I want to make sure that you realize this is an exciting time, and it is time to celebrate. So what you do in publishing, what do I mean by that? You turn it in. You give it to a journal. You give it to the judge. You put it on a blog. You put it on a website. You send it to the newspaper. You would put it in a client chart. You'd give it to your professor. There are so many places that you can turn in your writing work that it's unbelievable. Now, I think that you need to understand sometimes this is your choice of where to turn it in, and sometimes it's not. If it's not your choice, how do you decide where to turn it in? Well, let's think about this. If it's decided for you, for example, you're turning in documentation into a client chart, or you're turning in a report to the judge, or you're giving a paper to your professor, it's really not much of a choice. The person has already been decided for you. The format is pretty standardized, and you are not getting to make any choices about where you're turning it in. However, sometimes you may get to have choices. I'd like to point out that if you turned in client information to a public place, that could get you sued. That could get you in federal prison. So you do not want to turn in client information anywhere other than where it's supposed to be. But back to this other issue. If you can decide, then you can turn it into a multitude of different places. You can turn it into a journal. You can turn it into a blog. Give it to a website, a newspaper. You can go to a professional conference and turn it in there. You can do a presentation. And I know right now some of you are going, Dr. D, I would never do a presentation. And that was me a few years ago. Well, okay, maybe like 15 years ago. But I have learned that I have a lot of valuable information to share, and so I felt like it was to the benefit of my clients to present things at professional conferences, to do continuing education for groups of people. Even though it wasn't my favorite thing to do, I have learned to enjoy it because I know there's a purpose. And so that's one of the things that you need to think about. If you're going to turn something in, you've developed a new treatment protocol, you have figured out a new way to solve ethical dilemmas that's more effective. You have determined how to advocate effectively for your clients, and so you want to do that. Well, whatever you're going to turn in, you got to think about, who am I writing this for? Because if you're writing something for a scientific journal to turn it in, that's a very different piece of work than something you would turn into a typical citizen of the world. A person, if you're trying to write to encourage a person, for example, to advocate for a person to go talk to their legislator about a particular bill, or to send in a note or a phone call to say, I really don't agree with this bill, or this is the best bill ever, I want you to tell them you want them to vote for it. If that's a very different audience than, for example, a social work practitioner. If you have a social work practitioner, they're probably already going to be sold. They're going to have the same values as you. You're not going to have to do a whole lot of convincing. You just need to tell them what to say, what the bill number is, what they're going to need to talk about, the talking points for the legislator. A person may need to be convinced in the first place that they need to call because they don't share your values. So it's very important to know your audience. Is this local? Is this a state audience, a national audience? I've spoken before all kinds of audiences. I've provided written information to all those kinds of audiences, and you will too someday. At least I hope you do. Because if you don't go above and beyond to present information to people outside your comfort zone, then you're not really helping clients as much as you could. You need to always consider advocacy as part of your role of a social worker, whether you get paid for it or not. You do get paid for it, and it is an important thing for you to do. You also need to think about why you're turning it in. What is the reason you're going to turn in this piece of writing? Is it to challenge people, to assist people in figuring out a new treatment way to do treatment? Is it to educate people on a new law that has come out or a new policy? Is it to advocate for someone to change something? Or is it to fund? Is it to get a grant so that you can fund a project that you want to work on to benefit your clients? Is it to change someone? Is it to facilitate someone else doing something? Why are you writing it? What's your motivation? What's your purpose? These are all important things to consider when you're deciding on where to publish. You have to determine why you want to publish it in the first place. And I know you're thinking, sounds very challenging. I have to even think about extra work. But before you even write it, you're going to have thought through all these things. So you go toward publishing with the end in mind. So throughout your project, you should have been considering these things. Sometimes, though, what happens is in the midst of doing your project, you determine, I could use this information for another purpose. I think this would be really good to do for this. I can use this information for something else. And I am here to say I hope you do that. I hope some of the projects in this program encourage you to improve the situation for yourself and clients. I know personally for myself, I have taken students, I have worked with them on research projects, we have done presentations together. I know any professor in this program would be happy to go with you or to have you go with them to present at conferences, both local, state, and national conferences. Well, all three, it's not a both. But I know that that's the case. So if you are at all interested in furthering your experience here while you're at WKU, I encourage you to do so. Talk to some professors about some ideas you have and what you'd like to do. I know I tell you, if you write a really excellent piece, I'm going to tell you, I will challenge you to get that information to a wider audience. I've done it before, I'll do it again, hopefully with some of you for your final papers when you publish to me, because that's what you're going to do. So I encourage you to, following your vision, following your editing process, to determine you're going to turn it in for this class, for me, but you may find another audience for your work, a motivation to further disseminate this information. So don't hesitate to do so. This is my last lecture for this class, so I hope you've enjoyed the course, and I hope this course has improved your writing. I know it's been fun for me, so I look forward to seeing you all in class this year.